So here's the problem. I haven't actually talked about being a lady gamer yet. So here's the thing. I have always identified as a bookish person, and that was encouraged. My parents liked that I read. They actually didn't care that much what I read as long as I was reading. They allowed me lots of flexibility to read any kind of sci-fi, fantasy, but I was discouraged from gaming. I didn't become aware of the prejudice against a woman being a gamer until, relatively recently. And that's because I never put myself in a space to be exposed to those very harsh opinions. I did not declare as a gamer until, 5 years ago. And even when I did, it was very cautiously and very quietly because I had a social stigma embedded in me that was that gaming was taboo, kind of. Gaming was not an acceptable hobby. Gaming was what nerds did, and that's a weird thing because I definitely thought that, but I identified as a nerd, a book nerd, from a young age, and being a nerd just meant that you were passionate about something. That whole realm of negative terms that get applied to people with niche interests. Dork, nerd, weirdo, antisocial. I didn't even realize that when those words were coming from anyone other than my parents, they were being directed at me because I was a woman. It took me a while to even become aware of that because my family was, and still is to some extent, they're not in that world, and that's fine. But there's definitely a social stigma against being a gamer in general. So because I've always felt that, I started to think it was just that. I'd say, oh, I'm a gamer, and people are like, that's kind of weird. Like, no, you're not. Whatever. It took me a while to realize that I was getting that from everyone because I was a woman. And women aren't gamers. It becomes a much bigger problem when you get online. And there's several tiers to this. One tier is the sexualizing thing. I am a woman. That means that if I talk on the internet at all, really, and I mention that I'm a woman, or it's visibly apparent that I'm a woman, maybe my avatar is female, I'm probably going to get some comment at some point where someone says something really gross and really inappropriate. Best way to get a hard and fast exposure to this is to go on Twitch, which I did. I streamed on Twitch for 2 years on and off, a lot of the time playing my favorite games again, but also trying out new stuff. And I really enjoyed the aspects of interacting with chat on Twitch. It was just fun to chat with people, interact with them, answer questions, ramble on and on about my own personal observations in the game. Obviously, I love to hear myself talk. And then every now and then see a woman streaming and come into chat and say, suck my dick. Show me your boobs. Lick your hand and show me the saliva on the screen. That was a thing that happened. No. Go away. The grossest thing that you can think of, I had it said to me. I promise you. Trust me. This is not a unique experience. Every single woman who has ever streamed has had this happen to them so many times that they've lost count. And when I was starting out, I didn't have any moderators. I didn't really know how to Twitch. And a big problem was that I'm using a controller. How do I stop playing for a second and block people? I didn't even know how to block people for a while. Then someone offered to moderate one time and everything was fine after that. But for a little while there, I would have to say, hang on to the chat, put down my controller, type out and block that person or time them out, which I did for a while. And even then, I didn't want to be mean. I didn't want to yell at that person. I didn't want to get angry at them. I didn't even want to block them. I timed out people most of the time. I would time them out for a minute or 10 minutes. I forget what the default was. And say something to them. You are now timed out. I hope that you won't do this again. Say anything like that again, or I will block you. And I would give them one warning. And most people who do this are going around and fishing. So they pop into a chat, they make some noise, they wait for, they're trying to get a rise out of you. And if you time them out, they'll actually just leave because they are not ready to wait around. It's only in circumstances, usually with more famous people, that they think, or someone's just feeling particularly vindictive, that they'll actually stick around and continue to target you. That has happened to me, though. People have stuck around, said, waited and waited, and then said, haha, now I can talk again. And then I have to quickly block them. So yeah, there's the sex thing. There's the sexualization thing. I'm a woman. I'm going to get spoken to like I'm a prostitute and like I'm nothing more than a sex object and like I'm not human. Then there's the patronizing thing. Yeah. No matter who I am, no matter how important sounding my title is, no matter how old I am, no matter how professional I look, speak, or just sound by my voice, I will inevitably, in every single situation, likely be treated as though I don't know what I'm talking about. That's just a part of being a woman, actually, to be fair, but it is worse in gaming spheres. If I had written a game and ended up on a message board and talked about it, you can be sure that someone would come out and say, "Who are you? Why do you think you know what you're talking about? You're a girl." It's even difficult to explain this because there's this juxtaposition between, on the one hand, it's so obvious to me that it seems like a waste of time for me to explain what happens. And on the other hand, I know that there is a huge quantity of people who deny that this is even a thing, who don't know or don't believe that this is a thing. So I don't feel like I have to explain it. And then I feel like it so desperately needs to be known, but that there's this wall of disbelief that I'm probably not going to get through no matter how hard I try. That juxtaposition is very exhausting. You might play a game and love it and want to talk about it. You can talk about it on Twitter, at your local comic book store, anywhere, at GameStop. And there's a greater than 50% chance that someone will confront you and say something along the lines of, "Where do you get off talking about this? You obviously don't know what you're talking about." It can be really hard to respond to that in the moment, especially if it's one of the first times you've ever been confronted with it. I often and still sometimes just bow to it, put my head back down, and leave the situation. Now I do that because I know that it's very unlikely that I'm going to walk away from the situation feeling good no matter what I say. But to some extent, you end up thinking, either in the moment or maybe 2 hours later when you've had time to process what's just happened, you might think, what do you mean I don't know what I'm talking about? You played the game. I played the game. We both experienced the game. We have the equal amount of authority on this topic. And I say that because this often happens with other gamers. How about this? Everyone's had this experience. I've had plenty. But I want to hear from you. If you've had an experience like this, as you know, theoretically as a woman, but as anyone, basically, where you've been put down because of some ridiculous prejudice based on your appearance or gender or whatever, tell me about it in the comments. I want to hear about it. Tell me about it on Twitter. I would really like to hear more experiences because they need to be put out there. They need to be shared to just put down small building blocks to help us climb over this big fucking wall of disbelief that still exists for some reason about this problem. Because nothing's going to change until people admit that there's a problem. So the other thing that happens is the fucking abuse that happens. And this is where it gets a little rough. Because all the other stuff I've talked about is obviously a big deal. But it's not scary. And sometimes I'm scared. And it sucks. It shouldn't be that way. I protect myself pretty carefully, actually, so I'm not often scared. But there's potential for that. Women in this industry have often been targeted, been stalked, been sent death threats, been sent rape threats. It is a thing that happens, and it does get reported in the media, which is better than nothing, better than it being ignored, but it's not really responded to very well. It gets talked about, and then people try to decide if that woman deserved it, which, no. No one, especially a professional human in an industry, deserves to get death and rape threats and stalked and because of something that they did in their job or because of their simple presence in an industry that is incredibly dominated by masculinity and unwilling to change in that respect. I have not, for example, ever been asked if I slept with someone to get my job. That has not actually happened to me. However, I know it will happen. It will happen. Because it's happened to every other woman ever in a position of authority in the gaming industry at some point. That's stupid that that's going to happen. That's stupid that you would think that. That's stupid that you would say that to another human being, especially another human being in a position of authority. Being a woman in the gaming industry specifically, actually no. Being a woman in gaming at all, even just a consumer, even just a gamer, means that on Twitter, for example, I like to tweet. I don't say things all the time because ultimately I'm afraid. I'm afraid of the repercussions. I'm afraid of exposing myself to vitriol and abuse because there's a vicious circling pool of filth out there that always seems to be looking for more targets. And I'm a woman, so I'm a potential target. I could go on and on. I will stop. I'm putting out a lot of negative thoughts, by the way. I really love this industry. I just don't love every aspect of it. There's also some part of me that's nervous about saying any of this stuff in a video because I'm worried that my mother will see it. And she often encourages me to change my name professionally so that people can't find me. She gets very nervous about the state of the industry and my place in it for my own safety. I guess I'll have to take that risk.